The night before anything important always pretends to be ordinary. Dishes dry on their rack, a radio whispers the weather like a shy prophet, and people argue about salad as if lettuce has ever solved anything. In that familiar quiet, a phone call slices the room into a before and an after. A coworker, a daily companion in wisecracks and lunch breaks, a man whose jokes help the hours go where they should gone. The news doesn't ask how you feel about ceremonies or whether your schedule approves. It tells you a name and a fact, and waits while your throat tries to translate. Archie reaches first for the only ladder he trusts, humor, and finds the rung missing. He fumbles with practicalities because feelings are tricky, tries to opt out of the solemnities because solemnities have never once laughed at his lines, and then the current pulls him where it always pulls decent people. Someone has to say something at the service. He does not want to be that someone. He becomes that someone anyway. It would be easier if fate didn't complicate simple grief, but fate rarely misses a chance. Archie discovers at the door, notebook in hand and confidence pretending, that his friend lived under an identity he never bothered to ask about. The caps, the lunches, the workday shorthand never included this page, and now he has to speak across a culture he barely understands. The room holds its breath while he tries not to say anything foolish, and then says two foolish things and a true one. He talks about the way laughter lengthens a day, about how the right joke can throw a rope across a difficult hour, about the ritual of nicknames and camaraderie that happens among people who share a time clock. It isn't polished. It wouldn't survive a critic. But the sincerity lands. The awkwardness is not a failure. It is proof that a man arrived at tenderness the long way around and refused to turn back. In that moment, the audience isn't being told what to believe about prejudice or ritual. They are asked to notice the architecture of apology and the weight of gratitude when you finally pick it up. Later, domestic life chooses a different battlefield, not the chapel, but the bedroom, where courage is measured in whispers and blushes. Edith, practical and dreamy in equal measure, wants to make sure love doesn't assume it is done learning. She brings home a breezy how-to book that promises impossible transformations with the breeziness of a magazine quiz. The comedy writes itself, Toll House cookies cooling like chaperones, a sweater attempting glamour, an instruction list that sounds like it was written by someone who talks to furniture, but behind the jokes is a tender intention. Edith isn't aiming to become a stranger. She wants to confirm she is still the right person to be wanted by the man who knows how she folds towels and how she hates to waste garlic. Archie panics at the phrase, the privacies, declares a gag rule as only a flustered husband can, and then, because the universe adores irony, finds himself making the speech the book could not. He tells her, in the cracked poetry of a man who fights language for a living, that time has done kind things to his vision, that he sees what matters because the edges have learned to behave, that no thin paperback has anything to teach him about the woman who wrote his ordinary happiness by hand. A long marriage gets a new paragraph, not by fireworks, but by a compliment that fits like a beloved old coat. Then the city shows up to test everyone's ethics in a metal tube between stations. There is no syllabus for the subway, but there is always a class in session. The car assembles a cast the way a dream does, a doctor who wants to avoid liability more than he wants to perform a vocation in public, a lawyer with business cards for emergencies you hadn't considered yet, a loud drunk campaigning for attention with the worst slogans, a pickpocket whose hands look innocent until they don't, and an idealist who swore he'd never raise a fist. Mike rides with a creed he tells himself will survive anything. Archie rides with a suspicion that everyone is one complaint away from trouble. When a husband's hand turns rough and a wife's face flinches, philosophy steps aside. Mike throws a punch, a single one, and the car turns into a courtroom, a clinic, and a rumor mill at once. The punch lands, the noise swells, the victim blinks awake to threaten lawsuits, and long after the train moves again, the question remains. Mike is less shaken by danger than by the discovery that his body decided to defend someone before his mind finished voting. He will have to learn a new way of keeping faith with himself, one that allows for reflex and repair, one that recognizes that pacifism might be a compass instead of armor. The show doesn't resolve the contradiction. It lets him carry it, The way decent people carry heavy bags down crowded aisles without bruising strangers. Back home, disaster chooses comedy as its envelope and flame as its stamp. A shortcut in a fuse box, one of those late-night decisions that feels clever until light and shadow tell different stories, becomes smoke curling under a bathroom door. Edith wakes with the uncanny instincts of mothers and grandmothers worldwide, correcting chaos by calling names and turning the wrong knob first. Neighbors arrive with helpful panic. A garden hose discovers a second career. Treasured objects parade through the doorway as if auditioning for Noah. A camel figurine, a pink swan, tiny bronze shoes, a certificate existing solely to certify the existence of containers, all rescued with the solemnity of metals. Someone grabs the chair that has molded itself to Archie's back for a decade because a man knows his own geography. A dog chooses the worst moment to audition for clown school. The firefighters enter like a well-rehearsed sermon and finish the job before the punchline can get to the mic. The bathroom sulks, the house coughs, and everyone tries on relief like a sweater a size too big. Relief, alas, has a sequel. The insurance adjuster arrives with a professional smile and a calculator holstered where you can see it. He is not a villain. He is the physics of money wearing a tie. Archie, who believes that the world only responds to exaggeration because nobody hears small voices, imagines alchemy, turning smoke into upgrades with crisp forms and a straight face. The adjuster reads the room like a detective and the wiring like a diary. He finds a coin that was never meant to be cooked, and the conversation changes temperature. Numbers float onto the table and shrink in the air like wet sweaters. Words like arson are never officially spoken but manage to underline entire paragraphs by standing in the doorway. In the end, there is a settlement that feels like a scolding and a life that, despite singed edges, continues. Wallpaper suddenly matters, which is a ridiculous blessing because only people safe enough to argue about patterns have earned that argument. The moral is pointed but not cruel. Shortcuts in the dark love to send invoices in daylight. Threading through the comedy and calamity is an unflashy code of conduct. It's not written down anywhere, except in the way people apologize with verbs, in the way they hand each other cups of water before advice, in the way grief makes a room breathe together even when nobody has agreed on the lyrics. Funerals become workshops in humility. Marital awkwardness becomes a chance to practice fluent kindness. Public transit becomes a practicum in courage and aftercare. Insurance meetings become civics lessons in consequences you can survive if you don't flinch from the mirror. Each scenario chooses a small object to carry a heavy theme, a yarmulke that rearranges a man's assumptions, a kitchen paperback that turns embarrassment into a conversation, a penny that bought 10 minutes of light at the price of a smoky afternoon, a battered chair that testifies to the holiness of habit. The generational arguments are loyal returning characters, too. Archie wants the world to behave as if it's still possible to fix things with duct tape and a voice that knows its way around a foreman's office. Mike wants the world to become the place his footnotes promise and bristles whenever reality interrupts to ask for help carrying a sofa. Gloria wants the middle ground to be kinder and quicker and insists the calendar make room for improvement now, not after policy catches up. Edith wants everyone to stop losing the plot and come back to the part where they remember what they mean to each other. None of them get to win outright, and the show rewards them with a better prize. They keep living together. Neighbors act as the city's weather, sometimes gusty with bad advice, sometimes steady with a tool you need, sometimes surprising you by singing harmony when you thought they only knew complaint. If the funeral sequence is the spine, its vertebrae are made of little honest sentences. Archie's words are not technically correct. They are morally correct, which is rarer and more important. He does not pretend to know more than he knows. He looks at a casket and remembers laughter like a loan that didn't come due. His face says, "I'm sorry I didn't ask," and his mouth says, "Thank you for the time you gave me." And the room, which has seen better speeches fail because they forgot to be human, accepts the combination. The moment becomes a suggestion. When given a choice between eloquence and truth, choose truth and let your rough edges show their work. If the bedroom conversation is a tiny jewel, its sparkle comes from refusal to flatter or humiliate. Edith's curiosity is a compliment disguised as a question. Archie's reassurance is a vow disguised as a joke. They do not solve the future, they feed it. A long marriage, the story suggests, is not a monument but a garden. You weed, you water, you laugh at the stubborn vine that insists on climbing the drainpipe, and sometimes you stand there staring at a bloom you didn't plant and say, "Well, would you look at that?" Dignity, in this house, is measured not by how few topics you mention, but by how kindly you hold them. If the subway teaches anything, it teaches that creeds are best tested while standing, one hand on the rail, the other ready to become what the moment needs. Mike's integrity doesn't crack, it flexes. He discovers that a single, reluctant punch can be followed by days of honest thought, that protecting someone doesn't require abandoning belief, that the story you tell yourself about yourself must include chapters you didn't outline. The camera loves him more for refusing to turn triumphal. The car's odd assortment of characters, doctor counting premiums in his head, lawyer planting business cards like seeds, pickpocket retiring early for the night, become mirrors for viewers asked to consider what role they would play if the aisle between stops suddenly became a stage. If the fire has a moral, it's printed in small type and stuck to the fridge with a novelty magnet. The fastest route is often a circle. But it also has a gentler afterthought. People rush toward smoke because belonging is an instinct stronger than caution, and they carry out ridiculous trophies because love attaches to whatever is at hand. In the end, the house stands, a little embarrassed but still entirely itself, and a family that has spent so much of its air arguing about things that aren't fatal gets the odd pleasure of arguing about drapes. Survival is tastier when you season it with laughter. The adjuster leaves. The dog sleeps like he rescued everyone personally, and the chair returns to its corner with the quiet pride of a veteran. All together the stories form a single, humane thesis. Ordinary life is where ethics live. Not in speeches, not in headlines, but in the way you talk at a funeral for a man you didn't fully know, in the way you allow age to be a collaborator instead of a thief, in the way you defend a stranger, and then tell the truth about how it felt, in the way you admit a shortcut and pay the bill without becoming mean. The humor is not frosting. It is the instrument that allows difficult notes to be heard. The pathos is not a trap. It is the weight that keeps the jokes from floating away. The result is a neighborhood you can recognize even if you've never set foot on that block. People trying, failing, apologizing with verbs, forgiving with evidence, and keeping the lights on in each other's houses whenever circuitry or circumstance flips a switch the wrong direction. By the time the credits roll in your head, the images that remain are small and stubborn. A work hat held by hands that don't know where to rest. A paperback hidden under a pillow and then proudly left on the nightstand. A subway pole that feels warmer after a decision. A penny that once seemed clever now pinned in a lesson plan. A chair that knows a back by heart. A damp towel on clean tile. A dog convinced he is the reason everyone is still here. A room that smells faintly of smoke and cookies and something else you can't quite name except to say it's what keeps people from giving up on each other. The show asks for no standing ovation. It asks you to call someone, to say a kind word with evidence, to bring a chair a little closer to conversation, to tell the truth even if it arrives with elbows and needs your patience to find its seat.